Hi, I'm John Kursky. This is Atlas, and in today's video, this is part one of a two-parter about accessing the Power BI REST APIs within a semantic model. I'll show you how to set that up in Power BI Desktop, and then how to actually query the semantic models using PQL.Assert in part two. Let's take a look at part one. All right, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on all the new content and features we'll be rolling out in the coming weeks. With that, one of the things that Microsoft introduced recently was in the Power BI REST API, and not the Fabric API, but the api.powerbi.com API, a new endpoint called Execute DAX Queries. Now, many of you are probably thinking, well, there's been an Execute Queries around for a while. Well, this one is a little different in that the data that comes back is in a format that's supposed to be more efficient called the Arrow IPC format. And it also has less limitations. So you can query stuff like the info functions in DAX. And this opens up a new set of things that we can do with stuff like PQL.Assert and testing, and also querying more about our models through the APIs. There's just one kind of limitation that we're met with when we're working with a Power BI semantic model, and that's the semantic model doesn't have a native connector to query the Power BI REST APIs. This has been kind of a shortcoming for a number of years, and while you can query the APIs using something like web.contents, you end up having to store something like a client secret using a service principal in order to get an authorization token to then call the APIs. Now that's problematic with a semantic model because you're storing client secrets in plain text. And then, there's other ways that we can, get to this data using third-party applications or Fabric notebooks. But a lot of us want to use the semantic model to aggregate analytics and run tests from a semantic model. We might not have other options. We might not actually have access to a service principal. So a few years back, my team and I think this was on a plane flight, was like, I want to build out a custom connector so that we could query the APIs and get information like workspaces and semantic models. And at the time, we were hoping we could query a lot of the issue DAX queries and get data back about tests, but that was limited. But we came out with a version of that custom connector. But we then, since Execute DAX Queries came out, we now have a new version of the connector that you can query info functions and PQL.Assert and get this information. So today, I want to show you how to set that up in this first video. And then in a subsequent video, I'm going to walk you through how to use a template to be able to query the PQL.Assert functions, look at the info functions, so that you can actually build out a semantic model that runs multiple tests or gets information from these Power BI REST APIs. So up on my screen here, I have just a blank version of, or starting out version of Power BI Desktop. So there's a couple things we'll need to do in order to get started. The first, in order for us to use the custom connector, we need to go to Options right here, and I'm going to wait for the pop-up. And under Security, I'm going to pick Extensions. Not recommended. Allow any extension to load without validation or warning. This is the kind of the setting you need to in order for custom connectors to be used. And there's a lot of custom connectors out there. This one, if you're an organization who is wary about bringing open source code in, or a third-party visual, you can actually go to the site that I'm going to give you a link to. You can take a look at it, run through your security scanners, and compile the .mez file yourself. Everything is out open sourced. So you do need to click this option first. And then when you do that, you'll get a pop-up that says changes require restart. So what I'm going to do is hit OK, and I'm going to close down Power BI Desktop. And I don't want to save those changes. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to open Power BI Desktop just yet. What I am going to do is show you that a lot of the times when you install Power BI Desktop, and let me go to my documents. Oh, it says that folder's empty. That's interesting. Let's go here. Oh, that's not where I wanted to go. Go to my users, my account, and then go to documents. All right, so there's nothing here. Sometimes when we install Power BI Desktop, this will not show up. So what you actually end up having to do is create a folder called Power BI Desktop. And then I'm going to create a folder called Custom Connectors. And you have to make sure you got the spelling right and everything. And then I'm going to click into that. And then I'm going to click on the release that I have out here on the website that has the custom connector. And I'll put a link in the YouTube description. And what we're going to do is download that file. And I'm going to move it over to Custom Connectors folder. All right, at this point, then I can open Power BI Desktop back up. Now it has to sit in that specific folder because when Microsoft Power BI Desktops reloads, it's going to look to see if the custom connector option is enabled, and then it's going to look for any of the files and bring those in. And so now if I go to blank report, and then if I go to get data, so I'm just going to click the get data function, and I'm going to click on other. And now what you should see is connect to Power BI REST API commercial. Now if I click on that, I'm going to hit connect. You're going to get this pop-up about connecting to a third-party service. Hit continue. And then it's going to ask you to sign in. Now, one of the nice things about this connector is it's using OAuth credentials. So there is no client secret, there's no password that's stored in plain text. This is using the same type of connection that you would normally use with like a SharePoint list. And it's managed in Microsoft when you publish it to the service. You'll have to get a gateway, but locally at least, you're not storing anything in plain text. So this is what makes this kind of custom connector more secure from an authentication perspective. So I'm going to sign in. All right, I'm going to pause right there. There is something, if you're on a later version, the sign-in experience for data sources, I've noticed. If you unclick that, sometimes your login experience might work. So I'm going to close down Power BI Desktop again, open it back up. I'm going to go and get data. I'm going to go to other. I'm going to pick connect to Power BI REST API, connect now. Sign in. Okay, so I fast forward through the sign in process because I have the multi-factor authentication. Didn't want you have to wait for that. I'm going to hit connect. All right, now I have a list of all the functions that are available in the Power BI REST API. This is not using the admin endpoints. This is just using the ones that if you have access to a workspace and you have the privileges, you can use these functions. The one I always recommend if you're trying to test out and work with this custom connector the first time, you can use get apps because it doesn't require any parameters. And what you can then see is this is now connected to pulling all the apps I have with the work or the Power BI service I'm logged into. So I've logged into my personal tenant and it's pulling all the apps that I have in that personal tenant. If you have logging in with your company login, it's going to pull all the apps that you have access to here. Now I want to show you, if I click transform data, this is where this custom connector can be quite powerful. What I usually recommend doing is I'll just rename get apps to function catalog. So all I've done is renamed it. I'm also going to disable load because the catalog of all the functions I don't need to expose in my data model. And then I am just going to, under applied steps, I'm going to get rid of these 2 steps. And so now I've got a catalog of all the functions that are available to me. So let's say I want to get all my workspaces that I have access to, so I can inventory them. I can go down to something like get groups. Now, interesting thing about APIs, you'll see once you create the API endpoint, you don't change the name. So when Microsoft first came out with like Power BI, they used to call them groups, or you'd create groups and it'd create a workspace. Groups and workspaces are synonymous. So if I want to get workspaces, I call get groups. You also see there's a lot of references to data sets. They've been renamed to semantic model. So you just kind of have to know that you're using those names interchangeably now. All right, so if I want to use that function, I'll go to where the little green version of it is. And it's under the data column. And then I'm going to right click and add as new query. So now you'll get a list of, this is a function, or the end that represents the endpoint for get groups in the Power BI REST API. Now, for the most part, I've tried to copy over the documentation and the parameters as much as possible, so that if you're reviewing this and seeing what capability, you don't necessarily have to go to the Microsoft Learn or the Power BI website to try to learn these endpoints. So in this case, I can just, if I want to pull out all the workspaces, I can just hit invoke. And you'll see here, this is the JSON data comes back. Now, in my case, what we can do is then just parse that, click list, convert that to a table, and then I can expand on it. Now, some of you might be asking, why don't you just convert that to a table in the custom connector? Well, often new properties may show up, and if I had moved that into the custom connector, the choice of what columns would show up in the table is in the custom connector. Really wanted to make this as much as possible a pass-through, so that you can kind of choose which columns you want to appear. And then also, if new columns appeared, you didn't have to wait for a new version of the custom connector to come out. So in this case, I'm just going to pull back the name and the ID. I'm going to rename this to workspace. And then I'll go ahead and just do a rename up here, so that I call that like semantic or workspace ID and workspace name. Now the nice thing is at this point I could pre-filter it. Let's say I just want to look at any of the public files that I have. I'm just looking at that workspace. I can pick one or more workspaces if I want to. Now, let's say I want to pull out all the semantic models associated with that workspace. Well, I could go back to the function catalog and go, you know what, let me go to where it says get data sets in group. I can right click, add new query, and then at this point I probably want to do some housekeeping. I want to put all my functions here, that way I can keep those in good order. But for get data sets in group, all I have to do is pass the group ID. Well, here I can kind of start chaining together API calls to really build out the model that I want to use to inventory my system or execute queries against semantic models. And at this point, the next thing I can do is hit add column, invoke custom function, and then get data sets in group, and you can see I can pass in the column value, hit OK, and then I'm going to get the JSON representation of all the data sets in that workspace. Now, if I went back here and let's say I wanted to pick more than one workspace, so we can pull back, let's do PQL.Assert demo. If I went back here, now it's pulled the data sets for each one of the workspaces. Now I can go to transform, JSON. I just want to pull the values out, extract to new rows. Remember, there could be multiple semantic models in a workspace. And now I can expand here. And now I have the semantic model ID and the semantic model name. Now you can see where this becomes really powerful. So where you're trying to keep an inventory or run tests. Now in a semantic model, we can use the APIs to pull information about our workspaces, pull information about semantic models, and then we can also issue queries to those semantic models. And that is something for another episode or a new video that we'll do next time, because I've shown you a lot here, but I wanted to make sure you kind of understand how to set everything up, because this custom connector, while in our next video, I'm going to show you how to use it from the purpose of using PQL.Assert. This lays a great foundation in which you can use your understanding of your workspaces, your data flows, your semantic models to build out an automated inventory, to do health checks, to be able to check on maybe data sets that have failed to refresh or semantic models that failed to refresh. This is all information that you can get from the APIs. And if you have just a pro license and you just have desktop and you need to be able to just keep track of things, but you can't maybe pay for a capacity, or you don't have access for your security permissions, but you at least have access as a workspace owner, this can give you a lot of information. And what is a better tool to run analytics on the workspaces that you're managing than using the Power BI desktop or Power BI tool, a great analytics tool. You just needed a custom connector to take advantage of it. All right, so I hope you learned something today. What I showed you was how to leverage a custom connector that I've created to query the Power BI REST APIs, and showed you how to set up Power BI Desktop and how to use a couple of the features or the function calls in order to access those APIs. And in our next video, I'm going to show you how to use a template to be able to issue test queries to your semantic models. So if you're really interested in being able to point to a workspace, run all your PQL.Assert tests, and do it in a semantic model, so when you hit refresh, you can see anything that's maybe failing in test or production, this is the next episode or the next video you're going to want to watch. But until then, take care.